believe everything, and investors are no different. And even us, you guys, we have the most knowledge compared to other investors, except for people that go and get kind of brokers for years. Same financial statements, and we would come up with different information. Okay? So just bear that in mind. When you are working or when you're making decisions as whatever jobs you end up going to. Okay, motivated reasoning. Again, it's the same idea. These are all very small versions of the same idea. Agrees with you. You don't challenge. But if it is opposing, you are skeptical. Okay, now the self-attribution bias that leads to momentum. What happens with this one is if there's a good outcome, let's say you buy some stocks, okay? Who do you give credit to that decision? That's not a sentence. Do you give yourself credit for that decision? Yeah, I made some good stock purchases. Look what happened, everything went up. So, good outcomes to your own ability. Bad outcomes get blamed on the market if you're an investor. So basically, you're not taking any blame when things go wrong. You're taking all the blame when things go well. And again, that can be in every part of our life. So, this is in particular can lead to a stock market bubble. Share price goes up, and all the investors that say, yay, we made a good decision, what did they run out and do? Buy more. And then they start pulling in other investors that are copying another group of investors and so on. Stock price keeps going up, even though it had nothing to do with the underlying. First was everybody leaping on the bandwagon. Okay? So share prices go up, investors buy more, and that's irrationally. Share price goes up, etc. Eventually, the bubble will burst. Now, something like 2007, 2008, if the rating agencies hadn't given a high rating, it probably would have burst a lot sooner. But because there was an outside party included in that, people were more confident. Well, that's okay. They said it was okay. So that just wasn't investor irrationality. That was willful lack of carefulness on the rating agency's parts. So bubbles can be both. Tech bubbles way back when you guys were little, like in 2000, those were totally motivated on people got a tech that the price of the stock was negative. There was net losses, net losses, net losses. Stock price is going up and up and up, and it's not going to support itself when they never ended up making net income. So that was a frenzy of irrational investors all going, oh my God, it's going to be great, right? So bubbles that part of it, but there's others. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so that's a brief picture of are investors rational? Prospect theory versus decision theory. So, decision theory is a rational decision. Investors make rational decisions. Prospect theory, on the other hand, says, not quite. So, investors evaluate gains of risky investment, whereas technically, you should evaluate them the same. Okay, so these guys have done decades of research on investors, a lot on students because they're both profs. And if you've got a risky investment, losses scare people. So they're less likely to risk getting a loss. And investors react very strongly even to small losses. In fact, you guys, and this goes down to here, the disposition effect, they hold on to losing stocks. Because if your stock price is dropping or your portfolio is dropping, do you actually suffer a loss if you don't sell them? No, because they could go up any minute, right? So that's holding on to have got rid of them. Okay. Now, because investors react strongly to small losses, management try to manage earnings to stay away from losses. The difference between a small loss, like a few cents, and zero, they will manage the earnings so that they get zero net income instead of a loss, because losses are that scary to investors. Okay? The other thing, fear of losses can keep investors out of the market, which makes the market so we're looking at, is the market still efficient? Well, investors aren't rational. That's not a good thing. Instead of making rational decisions, we as investors act differently we act according to prospect theory. So the next piece of evidence that says, hey, maybe the markets aren't as efficient as we thought is on the next slide. Everybody good here? Does anyone need this? Case. Post-announcement drift. So, what happens with post-announcement drift? Good news or bad news. Could be good or bad. Let's put bad news or good news announced. Share price doesn't react right away. It takes time to adjust. So investors need time to determine what good news or bad news means. And it also depends on how fast analysts change their forecasts. So what happens? Here's the announcement date, and the share price doesn't react. Let's say it was good news, so it's supposed to go up. It doesn't react right away. It takes some time to finally go up. One thing of the market being efficient is it reacts quickly to new information. The longer it takes, the more post-announcement drift, the less efficient it's going to be. So, arbitrage profits may be possible, or should be possible. So arbitrage means you see it before everybody else, so you can benefit from it. Okay? So you're all educated in the subject, you should see it first. You should recognize, oh yes, that is good news, because you know the financial statement. So you can buy while it's still low, sell when it's high after it goes up. So they did a study that indicates that investors underestimate the effects of current earnings on future earnings. Market takes time to absorb the information. It's still not fully understood why it's so slow to react. Now, one researcher more recently, Lowe, in 2004, gave the adaptive market hypothesis that says investors aren't rational, they're boundedly rational. So the rational is bounded. The more change, the more their rationality kind of goes out the window. Okay? All right, you know, if you've got one change, you can make things and make it through and everything. But if 100 things are changing at once, you're looking for a job, you still have one course left for your degree, things start piling up. Is it as easy to make thoughtful, careful decisions? No. So, adaptive market hypothesis means investors are boundedly when the environment changes, it takes time to react. And more change means more time. Okay, so yet another thing that says, hey, maybe the market isn't as efficient as we thought. Any questions on that one? So post-announcement drift is just good news, bad news happens, and it takes share price a while to react. Okay, the market response, and just a reminder, this is another thing that suggests market isn't efficient. So all these things say the market isn't efficient. Flows go up. Why not? Is there a difference to you in the profitability, potential profitability in the future? There could be, there might not. Now, if you kept your accounts receivable policies very tight, let's say even through all of this COVID, you'd probably be okay. It would predict future profitability. But if you lose clients and businesses, then it might not be. Okay? So it's going to depend. But generally, actual cash is probably better and more reflective than an accrual. Okay? So, and we know that as accountants, right? You look at the cash flow statement, get rid of all the accruals, let's meet our needs. And that's in financial and managerial. So the market should respond more positively to income from cash flow rather than accruals, because cash flow is more likely to be persistent, so keep going. But there was a Sloan study, found no difference, and was able to, and that suggests market inefficiency. But again, conclusions are equivocal, so uncertain. So another way to describe this is investors counting net income the same way as cash flows. Eventually, the share price adjusted. Because we all did this when we learned the statement of cash flows, right? So if we said net income, wow, it's $1 million. And then we did statement of cash flows, and the operating section was -20. Is this representative of cash? I know it's hard, you have to think way back every years. So if net income's at $1 million, counting net income. But then you look at the cash flow statement, you do the operating section, which is really focused on the net cash we bought from it. How did we do compared to here? Which do you like better? Which number do you like better? This one. But which is more realistic? This one. Okay. What are some accruals we do in our adjusting entries? Was way back, that was 311. Well, we already talked about allowance for doubtful accounts, right? So if you wanted to make your net income look better, what'd you do with your decrease, right? So it's a teeny expense. And this would get bigger. All your other accruals are the same kind of thing. Okay? The other thing is you could recognize revenue early, and one of the questions talks about this. Remember when you learned how to do construction project revenue? Now you can only never. And if you're unsure about collectability, you have to wait till the very end. I think that was 315. You learn all that stuff in 315. So, same thing there. If you accrue your revenues early, this will look good, but this won't in the future. Okay? Does that kind of make not? Depreciation's another one. Make depreciation smaller. this year. Right? Extend the life of all your capital equipment. Then this gets bigger, right? Because depreciation affects cash flow. So it wouldn't influence that. So many people think of this as just as valid as this, where in reality, you know, as accountants, you look at both of these together. Right? Example help you guys? Okay, great. So here we are saying, oh yeah, the market's not efficient. So why doesn't everybody in the know get in there and make extra money off the stock market? So why can't we, all of us that know about financial statements, earn extra returns compared to the market? Well, first of all, high transaction. There's a cost to it. So flipping up and down with all different stocks is expensive. The other thing is investors are generally risk averse, especially the bigger the numbers. So riskier stocks are rewarded more, investors are risk averse, so they won't take those riskier stocks. The other thing is rational investors aren't, I wouldn't really use the word aware of irrational ones. It's more like they don't know who they are or how many of them there are. So how many? And they can't predict when the bubble will burst. Right, so that's the big thing. If you're ever playing around with penny stocks, I only say that because my dad likes to say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to make a killing on these penny stocks." Anyway, and maybe he will. You probably don't get into bond and you jump in somewhere in the middle. Well, who knows when that bubble's going to burst, right? So same idea here. Okay, so we talked about riskier stocks and how investors react to them. So knowing how risky a stock is important. How can we best measure the riskiness of a stock? So beta is proving not the best method. Instead, what most analysts are doing now